Okay, so what is it?
Soccer's on there.
Alright everyone, if I can get everyone's attention. Hey, okay, good evening everyone. My name is Darlene. I'm the program coordinator at the Campus Women's Center. Yay, Campus Women's Center. So this event, actually, fun fact, is in collaboration with F.H. King, and I have the F.H. King Students for Sustainable Agriculture. And fun facts about them, because I follow them on their newsletter. They're really about, they're looking for garden assistants. I think it might have been due already, but they also give free food on Fridays in the summer when it gets warmer. So shout out to F.H. King. We at the Campus Women's Center love them. And we as the Campus Women's Center, we do a lot of stuff with work within a feminist framework. If you checked outside, we have a big purple table. That's how you know it's us. And a very nice flyer if you saw it. Obviously you can't read it from here, but if you go up there, we have a lot of events for April if you want to check those out. Also, if you're not part of the mailing list, there's a paper there you can sign in your email, and we send those on a weekly basis. And we also have a Facebook group, all those things. So does F.H. King, so shout out to them as well. And now, oh, I should have had my phone ready. Ooh, technology. So we're just going to go and introduce our lovely speaker. So first of all, on behalf of the Campus Women's Center, I definitely want to thank Breeze Harper for coming today. She's phenomenal, and I'll read a bio, but I don't even think that's entire representation of how great she is. So shout outs to Breeze Harper. So here's a bio. Breeze Harper is a sought out speaker, writer, researcher, and consultant. A social scientist, she writes about food justice, animal rights, ethics, critical race theory, gender, class, and sexuality, and their intersections. She received her BA from Dartmouth College, her master's from Harvard University, and her PhD from the University of California, Davis. She's the editor of Sister Vegan, Food, Identity, Health, and Society, Black Female Vegans Speak, and the author of social fiction novel Scars. She is currently working on her third book, which focuses on the intersections of ethical consumption, alternative Black masculinity, and hip-hop. She lives in Berkeley, California with her partner and her 3 young children. So join me in welcoming Breeze Harper with Ethical Consumption in an Era of Neoliberal Whiteness.
Hi.
Hello.
So here I am. It took me quite a while to get here, but I'm here. And I'm thrilled to be here. I just share with everyone that for the past 6 years I've done a lot of public speaking, and I've either been pregnant and brought a baby with me, or not pregnant and brought a baby with me. And for the first time in 6 years, I'm not pregnant and I didn't bring any of my kids with me. And it's an interesting experience to be on a plane without someone screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." So I'm here and I'm focused, and my babies are back home in Berkeley, and I'm just so appreciative that I was invited to take place in this event. And I've never been to Wisconsin, and Madison's pretty cool. I like the town. I strolled through when I came home. I guess using the Badger coach bus last night. It's nice. I noticed that y'all shut down really early. In San Francisco, we don't really shut down, but I was like, no, there's nothing to eat after 8. That's interesting. So I did go to Fresh, and I got some food, so it's cool. So here I am, and I've reworked this title several times because I like titles a lot, and I get fixated on the title, and sometimes I forget about the content, but don't worry, I did both this time. And I actually been thinking a lot about what I want to talk about, and I retitled it a little bit, differently than the original, and it's actually Ethical Consumption in an Era of Neoliberal Whiteness and Black Rage, Ferguson remix. And it's a critical race, feminist, and materialist approach to this whole concept of ethical consumption. So I usually start off by singing. It's always the same song, even though my partner tells me I should diversify my repertoire, but I don't care. And I just like singing. I like the message of singing, and the way I grew up, song is the way that I really felt the messages of anti-racism activism, of trying to end systemic violence. So a lot of old gospel songs. I actually grew up in a household that wasn't religious, but I did enjoy listening to gospel music. Listening to music of Nina Simone, Sweet Honey in the Rock. So I've been really influenced by them. So I wanted to share with you something I put together that's been influenced by these people that is basically a singing message of what the work is is about, and what I'm doing in the form of this song. So. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones, we are the ones we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones, we will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to injustice. We will not bow down to exploitation. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. And those two songs, one was from Sweet Honey in the Rock, the first one. And it sounds much better when there's like 6 or 7 other people singing it, but I just kept it on my own. And the second one is from the theme song to the movie Panther, based on the Black Panther Party, back in 1996. It was like a whole bunch of people did it, and Vogue was one of the people that did it. And I just like that, those messages. So here we go. And, you know, just kind of loosen up. And conferences and talks can be so, like, academic and rigorous, and, like, no one really shows emotional expression. Just, you know, move your body, and I'm going to be playing music and stuff, so if you want to, like, move, because I want to move when I hear music, then do it. I'm not going to think there's anything wrong with you. So here we go. Ethical consumption in the era of neoliberal whiteness and Black rage. Ferguson remix. So this is not going to be a conventional talk, and this talk is going to be a tapestry of sorts. It will be fused with my own personal experiences with activism as a Black bisexual identified cisgender vegan woman. Part stream of consciousness, part frustration, part hope with some Tupac, Lauryn Hill, and others mixed in. This talk provides examples of what ethical consumption looks like during an era of neoliberal whiteness, Black rage, solidarity, and post-racial rhetoric, and their convergences. I'm here today to present to you analysis of ethical consumption within a vegan framework. Throughout my life as a social activist and scholar, it's been a struggle to watch the mainstream vegan crowd dismiss the human aspect of ahimsa-based veganism, especially as it comes to the lives of non-white people and the expectation that we non-white folk accept the mainstream post-racial outlook on life. Now, ahimsa means harmlessness and anti-violence, but the mainstream vegan movement applies ahimsa with a single issue focus most of the time, targeted only towards non-human animal suffering. Too often, when asked to engage with anti-racism and critical reflections on whiteness, us vegans of color are told by the vegan mainstream that such requests take away from the true work of veganism. Such expectations are not solidarity. Post-raciality is not solidarity. For me, Black rage is not hate, nor is it the desire to rid the world of white people. Black rage comes out of the desire to be unconditionally loved. For me, the essence of Black rage comes out of the natural desire to have the concept of ahimsa, the core value in veganism, to be applied to all, not just non-human animals such as cows, pigs, and chickens. One cannot understand how to create a more inclusive ethical consumption practice without understanding how Black bodies came to the USA through the unethical institution of antebellum slavery, which drove a capitalist economy based on the unethics, I made that up, of exploiting, abusing, and killing Black enslaved peoples. It is within this context that I invite you to explore ethical consumption in several parts. First, ethical consumption as a neoliberal whiteness practice, and 2, ethical consumption as an anti-racism practice. And like I said, I'll be using veganism as the platform to go throughout this journey with you. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this works. I'm going to share with you a YouTube video. Okay. I'll give you context. This is the Lauryn Hill, but it's a Black Rage is the song. It's dedicated to Ferguson. Do we hear anything? It's there. I just don't know where it is.
Maybe if you unplug your laptop, maybe it'll just play.
Hard to hear, huh?
Black race parallel, blatant denial, extreme economics, subsistence survival, deafening silence, and social control. Like we just mounted on wounds in the soul. When the dogs bite, when the leaves ring, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't feel so bad. Black race founded, fed us self-hatred, lies and abuse, while we waited and waited. Spiritual truths in this grit and invasion. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. Black rage is founded on training and training, finding your freedom, stop your complaining, poisoning your water while they say it's raining. Bad for complaining, complaining. Bones of bureaucracy, trying to use. Black rage is founded on blocking the truth. Murder and crime, compromise and distortion. Sacrifice, sacrifice, who makes this fortune? We false legal progress of human contortion. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. When the dogs bite, going to be when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't feel so bad. Weird surprises, mental illusion, forsaken back into purpose confusion, like human trafficking, or blood transfusion. Black rage is founded on these kinds of things. Politics, republic, the one world. Black rage is founded on denial of self. Dogs bite, human beings, when I'm feeling sad. I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't feel so bad. So bad.
No. Ah.
Please smile when I call your name.
So I just want to give context using music. And I think, I don't know if everyone could hear the lyrics, I'm sorry if you couldn't because it may have not been loud enough, but really giving context to Ferguson, and a lot of people throughout America get the rage and some people don't. And in my research, the majority of people who don't understand it are white racialized subjects. They just don't understand it. So I thought that song is like a 4-minute history of Black rage and giving it context and validity. So for this talk, my central questions will be the following. How is ethical consumption articulated through the medium of edible products such as food, herbs, and beverages? What can vegan objects such as food, books, and beverages tell us about concepts of ethical consumption and their connections to the lived experience of greed, such as anti-racism, racial privilege, colorism, normative whiteness? Lastly, what is neoliberal whiteness and how are ethical consumption philosophies affected by it? Ethical consumption is a huge subject. There are many definitions of what ethical consumption is, but I tried to just put it in one small little paragraph. So it's a way to consume within a capitalist economy that is ethical, fair, just. There is not really a concrete definition, but the ethical consumption movement has risen out of the wealthier nations for consumers to take accountability of how the consumer's practices can create less injustice and environmental damage. From making sure coffee is fair trade, to buying eggs that are from cage-free chickens, to buying food made from solar power companies, ethical consumers believe that capitalism and consumption can create a just world if done ethically, the right way. And this is the mainstream understanding of ethical consumption. And my problem with ethical consumption is that it is centered on the logics of capitalism, and no matter how green and ethical capitalism can be, capitalism, the root of capitalism means exploitation. So even if it's green, how is it going to create a just world? And part of the rhetoric, which I'll talk about later, around neoliberal racism and whiteness is that there's this belief that if you consume a product the right way, then everything will even out and we're not going to have all of these injustices in the world. So it's all about if you just consume with your dollars the ethical and fair way, then we don't have to focus on any other problems because by default that will make sure everything evens out. And this rhetoric is actually pretty central to vegan consumerism. And the notion that simply buying vegan products, buying vegan cookbooks, if you just do that, that's ethical enough. And we don't actually have to worry about any other issues in the world. And it seems kind of weird, and a lot of people actually believe that that's the way to create a more just world. So what I do is I engage in critical race and materialism. So what that means is, as a food studies scholar, I look at the meanings applied to objects, food objects, books, culinary equipment. And I see what society's meanings mean on those objects in terms of racial power dynamics and other systems. And for me, food is not just this mundane object. It can tell a lot about, like I said, the racial power dynamics for a certain era in America. It can tell you about how gender roles should be performed, all of these things and meanings applied to it. And what it means for me to take a critical race materialist approach to food objects in the ethical consumption movement and veganism is that I'm drawing from critical race theory, and that asserts that formal imperialism and legalized racism were replaced with this concept called racial neoliberalism at the end of the 20th century. And critical race materialism argues that racism was not eradicated, but in fact reconfigured in a way that fits the material and political investments of the global north, mostly white populations. And this arrangement is called coloniality. And mainstream ethical consumption rhetoric is not exempt from this arrangement. So I named this arrangement as being part of the system of neoliberal whiteness. So for example, formal colonialism is not legal anymore, but still if you look at how the world's resources are arranged and who has access to what would be considered ethical consumption objects, it's usually lighter white folk in the Western, Northern hemispheres. And that says a lot about racialized access to particular objects in the food commodity chain. And because certain policies and systems still have racialized consequences and effects on all people's lives, you're going to see those effects on who can consume it and who's affected as people who are producing those items. So we tend to hear a lot of vegans talk about, I like to buy chocolate that's vegan because the cow wasn't hurt in this production. And a lot of vegans either don't know or don't care that most of the world's cocoa, unless it's actually from a fair trade source, even that is not sure about, most of the world's cocoa is harvested by Black African children. And it's slavery, basically. It's like tens of thousands of children. So there's this disconnect between what is labeled as cruelty-free and ethical consumption by this consumer who's only concerned about how is it affected. And there's this disconnect on, well, it's still part of this capitalist model of how to get things and how to get resources. So what does it mean that there are human beings that are exploited to get these resources? And usually those human beings that are most likely to be exploited are not white. What does that mean? So that kind of the work that I'm doing is really understanding what this new system of neoliberal whiteness means. So what is whiteness? It's always changing, the definition is always changing. It's the conscious or unconscious promotion and advancement of the beliefs, practices, values, and ideals of Euro-American white culture, especially when those cultural values are represented in this model. Whiteness as a contemporary value system is formed by heteronormativity, neoliberalism, ableism, Christianity, consumer capitalism, cissexism, patriarchy, and middle to upper class sensibilities. There's this misbelief that real racists are Nazis or KKK members. And there's this misbelief amongst post-racial white folk in America that racism is not an impediment to opportunity and equality. And usually if a racist act happens, it's an anomaly. It's not systemic, it's just an anomaly. So what does it mean when I'm looking at vegan food and healthy eating? What do these themes mean? So basically, these are the common themes found. Everything is post-racial and should be. Race is no longer a significant impediment to creating equality, happiness, and health, like I said. And actually, if you bring up race in any form, it means you must be racist, because to talk about racism means you're racist. Those that are the model bodies in defining what is a moral vegan body engaged in ethical consumption are white, young, able-bodied, upper middle class, heteronormative. Thin bodies are the benchmark of healthy, moral, and green living. So whiteness isn't just about phenotypes, it's about the system of values. So yes, to some degree, there is a person that looks white, usually from European descent, because also these systems, value systems like Christianity, do you speak English, are you able-bodied? And now the new thin is the new white. Middle class and going green is the new white. And then there's certain types of white, not poor white, but middle class white. So there's all these different things that come together to form the system of whiteness, and it's always changing. But in a post-2000 era, what I had talked about, those tenets, that's kind of how it operates right now. And as mentioned before, the mainstream rhetoric around veganism and ethical consumption is that veganism should only be about animal compassion and individual health. But silence are the realities of people of color that cannot be post-racial, as well as how being low income affects the ease of going vegan and engaging in other mainstream ethical consumption practices. So with neoliberalism, change can only really come through individual consumer power versus making structural change. So they believe that all you need to do is buy vegan products to create a healthy body. And left out are issues such as racialized state violence, food deserts, and poverty that prevent marginalized populations from getting to the point where they can have consumer power, privilege, and choice. So there's this difference, okay? A lot of people, usually white, middle to upper class, it's more individualistic in how we make change. We're going to buy our way into making change. And you can see with most low-income people, people of color, they're working on a systemic and structural change. They come together to do this because they don't have monetary resources to enact change through consumer choice. So I want to actually talk about what ethical consumption looks like when it's through this rhetoric of neoliberal whiteness. And I wanted to give the example of the Flood Kitchen cookbook controversy. Are people familiar with Flood Kitchen? If not, that's okay. If my technology works the right way, I'll be able to show it to you. So, Flood Kitchen is a popular blog turned book. And it came out several years ago, and the creators never actually revealed who their identity, what their identity was originally. And that's because they used the word thug. there was this assumption that they were black. So here we go. At the beginning of October 2014, news was firing around in my Facebook circle that the popular blog, Flood Kitchen, had just released a cookbook. However, that was not a surprise, as it's not uncommon for outrageously popular culinary bloggers to find themselves with a lucrative book deal. What had my social media apps on fire was the news that the identities of the authors were not a couple of black men who were from the hood and experienced the thug life. The authors of Flood Kitchen were a white married couple. When asked why the Flood Kitchen creators hid their identities for so long, Matthew Holloway, one of the co-founders, responded that it was racist to even ask the question of the skin color of he and his co-founder, Michelle Davis. Remember, if you talk about race, you're racist. This response created rage throughout the Vegans of Color group on Facebook. Immediately, a significant number of Vegans of Color collectively found the defensive answer and dishonesty of the authors hiding their identities for so long, entrenched in cultural appropriation of the word and experience thug. A significant number of Vegans of Color began to mobilize via the internet and created an anti-racist Vegans of Color group. The function of the group was to organize to protest the Thug Kitchen book tour. I myself had mixed feelings. It wasn't that I thought Flood Kitchen was the sole problem. The controversy surrounding Flood Kitchen and a significant number of white vegans who thought it wasn't racist, while a significant number of Vegans of Color thought it was quite telling from a critical race materialist point of view. It was quite telling that so many whites literally did not understand black rage, that it was dismissed so easily. I got involved with the Facebook chats occurring about Flood Kitchen. I found myself becoming more and more tense and quite sad around the responses that so many white-identified vegans had towards the anger that Vegans of Color had about the use of the word thug. While Vegans of Color and their allies were trying to explain the context of using the word thug in light of Oscar Grant, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Martin, and Michael Brown's murder, an overwhelmingly large number of white vegans were in complete disagreement that the word thug had any racist or racialized connotations. I spent a good amount of time on the Toronto Vegetarian Society's Facebook page in the fall of 2014, reading several Vegans of Color's comments about Flood Kitchen. They were trying to explain to mostly white supporters the pain and suffering thug elicits in them. Several Vegans of Color were screaming at the top of their lungs what it's like to be a black mother to black sons, and how the agony of realizing that their little boys were instantly born into a culture in which they would be treated as thugs by a Canadian and USA mainstream culture. Two nations born out of white settler logic, but continue to be in some type of post-racial denial mode about it. This certainly wasn't ethical consumption. As a mother of black son, the twin sister of a black brother, the daughter of a black man, etc., I felt my body shake as I too tried to figure out how to explain to a plethora of post-racial white vegans why the thug in Flood Kitchen was so triggering and traumatizing for us. The rightful rage it caused because of its use. The rightful rage it caused because of its use encompassed a very clear example of an absence of ahimsa that veganism is anchored in. How was this a form of ethical consumption? Liz Ross of the Coalition of Anti-Racist Vegans of Color helped to organize the Flood Kitchen protest at the beginning of October 2014. A few days after the controversy started, I received a Sister Vegan Facebook status from Elizabeth that they mobilized successfully and that Flood Kitchen canceled their LA and Oakland book reading, that the authors and publishing company had decided to cancel it for safety reasons. And let me just show you something else about this. A lot of the language in the book and blog is like this. And you're supposed to, I mean, a lot of people have agreed, you're supposed to envision someone like Samuel Jackson saying this. So they'll say things like motherfucking lavender lemonade, calm your bitch ass down like a boss. I mean, just, that's how they talk. And it's supposed to be funny. So, white vegans of color and their allies are trying to explain, like, you know, that this is just not cool, right? So, Liz Ross personally wrote Daniel Power, the CEO of the publishing company for Flood Kitchen, to let him know that there would be a peaceful protest against the New York book event. She said that the vegans of color and allies wanted people to be aware of Flood Kitchen as a racist and minstrel show of a project. Interestingly, Daniel Power decided to forward the letter in his response to Gawker.com, in hopes that Gawker would join in shaming Liz and other vegans of color. And I'll read you the email, quote. This is the email that Daniel Power sent to her. I don't share your opinion that the word thug, itself a variation of thuggy, groups of assassins that roamed India for some 600 years, is a code word for the N-word. Thuggish behavior is fairly accepted as boorish, bullying, and domineering in character, regardless of ethnicity, and the tone of the book, including the extensive use of swear words, is symptomatic of that behavior. So even though I disagree with you, I do think you have a point, perhaps, and that it should be considered, even debated, but never ever under simplistic, jihadist, even calls for banning, censorship, and boycotting, end quote. And I immediately thought, whoa, did he just use the term jihadist in response to Liz and her allies to engage in peaceful protests? When did racial microaggressions against vegan black women proposing peaceful protests become an ethical practice? So, you know, when I was going through this talk and thinking about the ways in which even liberal white people respond to deeper engagements with anti-racism, racial dynamics, and this defense mechanism comes up. And I don't know how many people are familiar with the article that came out called White Fragility. Okay, it's okay, it just came out. There's these beautiful bullet points where it talks about this white anti-racist ally going in and trying to talk to groups of white people about racism. And saying, first of all, we're not attacking you as an individual. First of all, you're not even literate in racial paradigm awareness because your literacy is from like the day of anti-violent racism where you think like slavery is what racism is and lynching black people. And if you don't do that, then you're not racist. Thirdly, it doesn't matter if your intention wasn't racist, there are racist and racialized consequences to your racial ignorant behavior. So it's just like very interesting. This article talks about that instead of really focusing on dismantling systemic racism and really understanding I need to shut up and listen to the stories of what people of color are saying, it focuses back on whiteness and white fragility because collectively, white America, they're just not taught to deal with the subject of race when it comes up. And it's hard, and when they're asked to think about it, they think they're being attacked as an individual. So conversation usually shuts down because it's the white person talking about how their feelings were hurt. I don't feel safe. And it's a great article because the author's talking about, wait, you don't feel safe about talking about racism, but like we're talking about a whole system where black people and brown people don't feel safe walking around to the grocery store or they might be shot by a cop. So it's just like, it's interesting. So the article is called White Fragility, and the way the Fun Kitchen publishers and the authors kind of responded and say, we're just gonna, we're gonna shut down these book tours in these cities because we don't feel safe because a few bad apples decide to spoil everything. Instead of turning the lens on themselves and being more critical and thinking, okay, so maybe our intention wasn't to be racist because we didn't really know that if we do this for profit and create this book around ethical consumption and veganism using FUG, that it would actually create these problems. Like it would have been nice for them to turn the lens on themselves and think about, okay, that was not my intention, but I'm going to learn more about this. I'm going to learn more about this accusation that FUG has this racialized connotation. I want to start thinking more about when Trayvon Martin's murder happened, a lot of people who were for the man who killed him saying things like, well, he kind of had thug behavior. He looked like a little thug. I'm going to really start thinking about what it means in an era of racial profiling, militarized state, militarized police violence, prison industrial complex. I'm going to really start thinking about what it means that I potentially planted these seeds of racism to my fans and potentially got them to start thinking uncritically too about what this means. So that's what I'm trying to figure out when I'm talking about things like ethical consumption. I'm talking about critiquing things like Flood Kitchen. It's not that these individual authors are bad white people. It's about what is my role as a white person in either dismantling or perpetuating systemic racism, neoliberal whiteness, anti-blackness, whether it was my intention or not. And they failed to do that, and thus far as the Flood Kitchen authors and the publishers, they continue to fail to really reflect on, okay, so this is fun and good and fun, but what am I actually doing to address those systemic problems? So I'm just going back to this. So I had just read to you what Daniel Power had written to Gawker and Gawker published. So Jordan Sargent actually ended up posting Daniel Power's letter and critiquing it. And I think Daniel Power actually expected most of the white world to agree with him. So Sargent writes, he wrote a long letter, but I want to take a quote out. Where Power is wrong is in ascribing that dissonance as purposeful. As has been pointed out in basically every piece criticizing Thug Kitchen, the word thug is in the title so that you can think of a mean, scary black person. Thug Kitchen uses thug, like I said before, the same way as Michael Dunn, who shot an unarmed black teenager for playing rap music too loudly. That the voice of Thug Kitchen doesn't match the character they aim to evoke does not exactly absolve them of their intentions. So there's no way around it. Black folk in the USA collectively fear that our black loved ones will be perceived as thugs by the white American imagination, ensconced in centuries of negrophobia. Throughout my years, I have heard plenty of black people who tell me that they do not feel safe going to mostly white farmers markets in places like North Berkeley, California, where I live, because of the worry of being racially profiled by the police. And I remind you, the push for shopping at farmers markets is part of the mainstream ethical consumption movement. However, the realities of feeling unsafe in predominantly white areas hosting farmers markets is the consequence of neoliberal whiteness and systemic racism. This concern makes sense to many of us people of color. In fear and anticipation, many of us black identified people in the USA wonder if our black family members and friends will come back home that evening from work, from school, alive. He's late? I hope an officer didn't pull him over and shoot him. I hope he won't end up like Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, or Michael Brown. Critical race philosopher George Yancey has argued for years that one need not be consciously racist to still have deeply somatic fear of black male bodies walking around in public space. As a matter of fact, many times it is this conscious racism and somatic fear that drives preemptive strikes against black males, envisioned as dangerous thugs. So, it's almost natural that there are black folk who wouldn't want to be in a white area in which ethical food and other products are available. There are vegans of color who say they will attend an animal rights conference, or even if it's in a predominantly white area, or in a former sundown town. Do people know what a sundown town is? Historically, a sundown town was in white communities where non-white laborers are allowed to come in during the day to be nannies, to clean, to garden, do whatever the service work is to keep the white neighborhood alive. And you better leave when the sun goes down because you're not welcome after. And if you're there when the sun goes down, then you might be murdered, you might be lynched, you might be put in jail. And there are towns that are not, formally called sundown towns in America anymore, but still people know if you're a person of color, you're not supposed to be there after sundown. So, really? Yeah. I've not attended conferences dealing with ethical consumption, veganism, animal rights, when I know that conference is probably in a town where I will not feel safe. So it's like me as a black feminist, critical race feminist, doing this work. And as a researcher, and I tell my audience, I have to think about where I want to do this work, where I speak, because it's dangerous in certain parts of the country to actually, it's okay to talk about slow food, good food, and ethical consumption, but you might not want to bring in the racial component. You might not want to start pointing out whiteness if you're in a largely predominantly white area where there's racial tension. That can be dangerous for a lot of us. And this is nothing new because a lot of people have been doing this work for years, decades. They had to strategize how to travel throughout America certain times and make sure as people of color that they're safe or as safe as possible. So it's interesting that I'm still hearing this. It's it's different, but it's the same fear and concern. How do we go around and navigate through this nation doing this work? Whether we're doing ethical consumption or we're doing food work, health activism as people of color, and then thinking about those other pieces. Where do I go where it can be safe? Where do I go where I'm not read as and treated as a quote-unquote thug? So, Fun Kitchen and the Anti-Racist Vegans of Color protest of the book is a microcosm that reflects the current racial climate in the USA. the book supporters and post-racial comments by a significant number of mostly white people, it says a lot. It says this: I don't have the trauma of racialized and state violence against my body that Black people do and other racial minorities do. Why should I care about the word thug and the racially violent history of these events that are wrapped around it? As a matter of fact, I don't even have to realize that the term has been racialized and used against murder victims, such as Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin, to justify their death. So, for Thug Kitchen, their book is certainly a form of ethical consumption and how to, practice ethical consumption through eating vegan diet. And their understanding, they believe veganism is a form of ethical consumption. But its central logic is grounded in neoliberal whiteness. Furthermore, the way they appropriate and consume thug is unethical. Recently, when I searched for book titles with thug in them on Amazon, over 100 titles came up, and 90% of them depicted Black characters on the cover and focused on urban Black life. Mostly novels from urban lit genre, it was obvious to me that the connotation of thug is Black, urban, gangsta, and reflects the embodied experiences and perspectives from people who identify as Black and urban from the hood. It's obvious that this is how the Thug Kitchen authors are using the word thug. So when I listen to and read white commenters defending the use of thug is not Black, I roll my eyes even more and truly wonder what rock many of these commentators have had the privilege of living under in order not to need to know this recent and racialized history. Also, type in thug in Google, and the most popular information that comes up is Tupac Shakur's Thug Life. Shakur writes about what he means when he says thug life. Quote, commonly mistaken for a criminal, thug life is the opposite of someone having all he needs to succeed. Thug life is when you have nothing and succeed when you have overcome all obstacles to reach your aim. End quote. And in 1994 interview with Shakur, he sheds more light on how he's invoking this term, thug life. Quote, my mother was a woman, a Black woman, a single mother raising 2 kids on her own. She was dark-skinned, had short hair, got no love from nobody except for a group called the Panthers. I don't consider myself to be straight militant. I'm a thug, and my definition of thug comes from half of the street element and half of the Panther element, half of the independence movement, saying we want self-determination. We want to do it by self-defense and by any means necessary. That came from my family, and that's what thug life is. It's a mixture, end quote. Did you hear that? Did you hear what he was saying? He's talking about Black Panthers and reality of the street life. If you understand anything about the Black Panthers, they were phenomenal when it came to health and food activism and justice. So a lot of mainstream media basically narrated to everyone that they're just people who are toting guns and want to kill white people, and that wasn't what was going on. They were trying to make systemic changes. They were sick of being beaten down by a white supremacist society, and one of their goals was to come together and create food security and health access for Black people who were being denied that. So, in a sense, the Thug Kitchen authors, in terms of how they're being part of ethical consumption and creating these cookbooks around what they think should be ethical consumption, they've appropriated the word and experience of thug life. They've relied on the white supremacist imagination of what thug means. Shakur even talks about how mainstream media had made him and thug negative. This image of Black men cussing without much depth or intelligence. Now, when applied to how thug is being experienced by protesting vegans of color, this is what Thug Kitchen feels like to them. Thug Kitchen is a minstrel show of foul-mouthed Black people who, even when given the chance to create an ethical consumption vegan cookbook, would put in foul language after every other recipe ingredient. There wouldn't be any of the depth of understanding that Tupac Shakur and others have about how neoliberal whiteness damages the lives of Black and brown people. Folk like Tupac have an embodied knowledge of thug life. The Holloway and Davis's appropriation of the word thug becomes problematic because it's not only erasing the significance of Shakur's thug life essence, it becomes a mockery of how white LA pro-vegan couples think or imagine how inner city Black people from the hood will communicate ethical consumption and culinary ideas around healthy eating. Thug Kitchen purposefully misunderstands and trivializes Black rage, It disconnects black rage from the roots of systemic white supremacy, environmental racism, racial profiling, prison industrial complex, Jim Crow, and anti-violent slavery. We are supposed to laugh that the black thug always seems loud, angry, and always cursing, because in a post-racial world, what does he really have anything to be angry about? When Shakur talks about obstacles to achieving a healthy and economically stable life, he's talking about factors such as environmental racism, food deserts, racial profiling, all these things I had mentioned before. And these are all very significant factors that would affect the ease of going vegan and being ethical and making holistic and healthy meals that are suggested in the Thug Kitchen cookbook. These factors are the collateral damages of neoliberal whiteness, legacies of colonialism and anti-blackness. So when I went onto the Thug Kitchen blog and book, I thought, okay, maybe they're going to have some type of sentence, anything that asks their fans to reflect on environmental racism, Tupac, anything. But they don't address anything. They don't address the lack of easy access to healthy and holistic food that one normally finds in the geographies of thug life that Shakur comes from. And such geographies can be referred to as what geographer Neil Smith calls uneven geographies of development. Critical race geographers such as McKittrick, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and Clyde Woods have added a racial component to this concept of uneven geographies. Such a racialized component shows the social and economic devastation that's ongoing consequences of neoliberal whiteness have caused within brown and black communities throughout the USA. It has produced the black rage that we hear in Sense in the Lauryn Hill song that I first played at the beginning of this talk. For Shakur, the strategy in using the word concept thug life is political and consciousness raising, a way to encompass non-white ontology and bring forth how black racialized consciousness impacts black ontology within white settler nations like the USA. It is to literally validate and give a critical race canon to black rage and the racialized geographies of uneven development it comes from. Epicurious.com showcased the Thug Kitchen in October of 2014, giving it a positive response. They even titled the article using thug life in the title. I can't imagine this wasn't on purpose in terms of making a reference to Shakur's Thug Life. Entitled Thug Life, a behind-the-scenes look at the masterminds of Thug Kitchen by Matt Duck, Duck refers to the authors as masterminds. Now, it's very important to understand that Epicurious.com is part of this whole foodie landscape of ethical consumption, post-racial rhetoric. I would also argue that Thug Kitchen is too. Within foodie-oriented culinary projects, omitted usually are many issues that do not plague those of the racial and socioeconomic privileged demographic of the USA. And ethical consumption really is part of this foodie culture. In the book Foodies, Democracy and Distinction in the Gourmet Foodscape, Johnston and Bauman write, quote, "The major discursive omission concerns issues of social justice, food security, national food sovereignty, and labor exploitation. These issues are virtually absent in the study of foodie discourse." End quote. In searching through the entire Thug Life cookbook, there are no reflections on racism, food justice, whiteness, privilege, environmental racism, food deserts. Even more interestingly, there is no definition of the word thug or even any reference to Tupac or similar, which I mentioned before. There is no solidarity or movement building to understand the tone of black rage and thug life that have been appropriated. So both Dan Quayle, he was the former vice president for some of you who are not my age, don't remember. Both Dan Quayle, who demonized Tupac Shakur and hip-hop rap movement, and the Thug Kitchen reinvent thug life in a way that erases Shakur's reality, and they replace it with this thug that's embedded in racial stereotypes about black and brown men. So I want to take this controversy surrounding Thug Kitchen as an opportunity to talk about what ethical consumption through veganism can look like when it's post-racial, right? But also, what does it look like if it's race conscious and there's folks of color who are invoking a vegan praxis of black rage and making visible that we live in an age of neoliberal whiteness and systemic racism. So many of of us, vegans of color doing ethical consumption work, must navigate the multiple meanings of thug life, and how we respond to both being racialized as a thug and how we respond to the geographies of thug life that make it difficult for either most of us, brown and black people, who struggle to secure healthy and socially just ways of living. So we seek to bring these realities into how we define and practice ethical consumption. And even for black and brown people who never even spent time in the hood or engage in the thug life, it doesn't matter, because by default, black people are seen as a monolith. So we're all thugs. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a hoodie or if you're wearing a business suit, if you have a GED or if you go to Princeton. It doesn't matter. In American culture, you are seen as a monolithic group of people who are thugs and who are there basically as scary people that may or may not hurt white America. It's very interesting. So I want to share with you what an ethical consumption praxis can look like through several people's work that I've been looking at. So the first person I want to share with you is DJ Kavum. He is a hip-hop vegan activist, black man, out of Denver, Colorado. And his vegan praxis is actually, it's fighting against capitalism, and also it's fighting against the prison industrial complex, it's fighting against racism. It's awesome. So he has this anti-corporate capitalist ethical consumption praxis. It's Afrocentric veganism. He believes that black people need to return to their African roots of health and healing. With his ethical consumption praxis, he focuses on racial profiling, the prison industrial complex as an environmental health issue, affecting DJ Kavum's community. So it's integrated into his vegan praxis. It's not a separate issue. So I actually met DJ Kavum when, let's see, it was 2012, and he invited me to speak at the Brown Sugar Festival, which he gives every year, and basically he's reaching out to brown and black youth, teaching them about gardening, healthy eating, healthy living. So he took me around his neighborhood, and he's like, you know, this is where they're trying to build a Burger King, and over here, this is where they're trying to build a new prison. And then he's like, and over here, we're trying to resist this, here's our garden. So he's just like amazing. So he's kind of responding to this systemic violence against black and brown youth by teaching them that, you know, we can grow our own food, and to respond to community violence, we have to actually have to take action and be our own leaders through, you know, food and health sovereignty. And it's basically how he responds, like, to his own black rage about what's happening. You know, he's being productive about this and creating this ethical consumption praxis that is not post-racial and acknowledges that his community is the result of the consequence of neoliberal whiteness. So DJ Kavum is similar to Tupac in which he was raised in the hood, and he was raised by a single mom, and a single mom was very aware of how racism and classism and violence is affecting her boys, their access to health and opportunity and happiness. And I wanted to share with you that his practice of ethical consumption, it's through hip-hop methodologies. So he has these albums, and he has an eco-hip-hop vegan curriculum that's through music. And he's amazing, he's awesome, and I always talk about, he's part of my book, Alternative Black Masculinities and Veganism and stuff. Like, he learned to be a midwife, and he and his wife had like all 3 of their kids at home, and he like delivered them. Like that's amazing to me. And he's just like this different model of, you know, there's a thug kitchen where they want you to think of what a thug is and what they do and what they say. And then there's this DJ Kavum where he's lived the thug life, but the way that Tupac talks about, and then he's developed an ethical consumption praxis around that, where he's reappropriated the term, but he's not just doing it to make money, he's also figuring out how can we make systemic changes, how can we dismantle racism, how can we actually make what's happening, what has happened to young kids like Trayvon Martin, how can we make that part of ethical consumption praxis? And he does it with music. I love it. He's so awesome. So, like, he's got this song called G's Up, Hose Down. And yes, this is a play off of Snoop Dogg's song from 20 years ago, which is disgusting, misogynistic. But for DJ Caleb, G's are organic growers. And a hoe is like, you know, you're hoeing the garden. So cultivating your community through cultivating your food. And I love this video, and fingers crossed that when I play it, you can hear what's going on. So, one second. I'm trying to, it's a little hard because I can't quite see. But let me copy this. And so he's got this, and then he's got another song called Wheatgrass. And he's, you know, and at the end he's like nettles or raspberry leaf, y'all, and he's just like, I love that. I just love, you know, it's just awesome. So let me, okay. And I'm sorry, I don't know why this doesn't work.
Cheese up, post it, drop a seed on the ground, turn it up all around, spray the water on the ground. Cheese up, post it, from the market to the farm, got the food in my palm, and I'm from where I'm from. Cheese up, post it, you know what's going down, got the food on the ground, and we growing year round. Cheese up, post it, from the farm to the fridge, and I'm from where I live, got to come and feed the kids. Grew up that mile high, learned about that G-Life, young youth, fresh fruits, beans, and that brown rice, brown sugar, brown bread, going with my brown eyes, black skin, African, cheat up on the ground, home food, dropping jewels, eat up, every line, gardening, harvesting, gotta watch the body shine, produce and produce, soul food, redefine, cheese up, go swinging along with the rise, I post, drop a seed on the ground, turn it up all around, spray the water on the grain, cheese up, post, from the market to the farm, got the food in my palm, and I'm from where I'm from, cheese up, post, you know what's going down, got the food on the ground, and we growing year round, cheese up, post, from the farm to the fridge, and I'm from where I live, got me going for the kids. Real G's got herbs, pocket full of seeds as I'm making my ropes. See me in the sunrise, watching it grow. Irrigation for the water, and I'm watching the flow. I'm saving money for sure. Plant no GMOs. So you need an organic, aquaponic, supersonic, collard greens, and no meat. Compost, deep whole heat like a hoop house on the rooftop. In the ghetto, deep down south. I post, drop a seed on the ground, turn it up all the way.
So I'm so proud of him. He's like my little brother. I mean, he's not really my little brother, but I feel like, you know, he's like my little brother.
This is how we doing it. We harvesting the food right now on Harvest Moon. Please let them know what we're doing in the community. Check out djcavem.com, djcavem.com. Motivation, see it on iTunes, Amazon, The Harvest, the produce section, The Harvest.
So that's one, and then the other one I have is called Wheatgrass. So let's see what you're talking about. It's talking about the police at the beginning.
In a time
No, this is
when it was going organic, there was one man who stood against the tide and changed the eating habits of a nation.
That's not what I want to show you. Okay, you can see it.
Don't understand, it's the king of the man, and the 1% scared, and the free black man in my energy. Look at me, body made of sun, moon, and stars, ride for the cause, full justice, and free million from the Mars. Life is so hard, but you know I'm living easy. Came from the hood, son, so you know how we be. Smaller than the pigs, so them cats can't touch me. Rocking clips in the UK, they say they love me. Africa's next, sit back and relax. Black human tea, master clinks with the flax. Word to Bobby Hutton, they ain't occupying nothing. Matter of fact, they asses frontin', they must be lazy. Waiting on the FDA to feed their baby. You want it, I got it. See me in the farmer's market. Roots, beans, and greens in the melons and things. And with that white grass.
So I'm going to kind of stop this. Okay, so I don't know if you can hear what's going on, but like he is like talking about black human seeds with a flax master cleanse, and he's talking about Bobby Hutton, and He's talking about, like, he's just mixing it all up. Like, this is an ethical consumption practice that is completely different from Fun Kitchen, and I get excited about this because this is not what we see ever. Like, when I look at ethical consumption, when I look at who are the leaders, what they're talking about, you don't see DJ K-Bum in the center, you know? And the way he's using hip-hop methodologies, reappropriating thug life, what thug life meant to Tupac Shakur, how he kind of puts it all in his vegan praxis, the ethical consumption, to me, it's amazing, it's brilliant. And he's trying to put this as a curriculum into schools as well. So I just wanted to share this with you because, like, this is awesome. And I don't know, I just feel inspired because, I mean, as a black woman where I'm constantly listening to the mainstream take these post-racial approach to the food movement, food revolution, and not intersecting it with the very real problems of you know, these consequences of racism, of slavery, not just black people, but mostly communities of color. It's just, it's frustrating, you know? I live in the Bay Area, and we're huge with the slow food, good food, sustainable movement, but still the conversation, unless you're in Oakland, the conversation about, you know, Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, like really it has to be, it's not an extra, that it has to be part of revolutionizing the food system so everybody can get what they need. It's still seen as an extra. It's not seen yet that it has to be part of it, that anti-racism has to be part of ethical consumption. It has to be part of just making a world where there is food security. So with books like Fun Kitchen and that being part of, you know, the foodie ethical consumption landscape and being very post-racial, they don't talk about these things. What's going on? Okay. They don't. It's just not part of it, and it needs to be. So my next thing was I'm going to show you. The last thing is what I'm doing personally. So I'm just critiquing and I'm actually doing something. I put together this conference, which I'm not really sure, but my the projector for some reason is stopped.
Do you want to take the building manager for you, or do you want like us to try to figure it out?
I'll just show I'm going analog. Okay? This is so what I did was I was frustrated by all of this, by Ferguson, by like I'm very transparent to people. I am constantly worried about my father, my twin brother. My twin brother lives in rural white Vermont, and I'm like, you gotta be careful, because I have this, you know, this narrative in my head that he's not safe. So, you know, I became frustrated. So last year, I decided to organize my own conference, which is coming up in a few weeks. It's called The Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter, Challenging Neoliberal Whiteness While Building Anti-Racist Solidarity Among Vegans of Color and Allies. So these are the basic questions that will be addressed, and I had a wonderful PowerPoint up there, but it's not there right now, so I'll go analog. So these are the questions we're going to ask. What does ethical consumption look like in an era of Ferguson, and as you know, within this continuum of the Black Lives Matter movement? Is it possible to have ethical consumption that resists neoliberal whiteness and systemic racism? And how can we make mainstream vegan USA aware that the murders of Trayvon Martin, Renisha McBride, Michael Brown, Oscar Grant, that's the collateral damage of being in collusion with neoliberal whiteness. So Black Lives Matter is happening because of an America in which post-racial rhetoric dominates the mainstream. It's been accepted as truth by many white Americans. And the narrowness of perspectives, thought, and rhetoric extends to vegan, largely white spaces in which embracing anti-oppression is limited, like I said before, to non-human animal rights and speciesism. It does not acknowledge other forms of oppression, such as systemic racism and xenophobia. So in this context, Black lives really don't matter within that mainstream vegan rhetoric, and instead work to combat racism and other forms of human oppression is seen as an unnecessary distraction from the real work for non-human animal liberation. Many of us Black vegans and non-white and white allies find that our politics cannot be single issue, and as much as veganism provides an anti-oppression framework, it must do it holistically. And I feel that way also about ethical consumption, whether you're vegan or not. So we can't ignore the connections between child slavery on cocoa plantations and the enslavement of non-human animals on a factory farm. Cruelty-free cannot simply mean that no non-human animals were harmed during production, but the workers who produce our goods are also treated badly. We challenge the racial and class privileges that allow mainstream vegan rhetoric to speak of lower-income people of color who don't adopt plant-based diets as lazy without seeing and understanding the realities of lack of access to good, affordable food. And we question the ease with which many white vegans shrug off the flood kitchen controversy, their inability to see this minstrel show as reinforcing pernicious stereotypes about black people that make it easier to accept violence against them. We note that from the beginning, Black Lives Matter activists have insisted that queer people, feminists, people from the spectrum of classes, those who are differently able, etc., not only be part of the movement, but that their perspectives help define its strategies and goals instead of accepting traditional hierarchies that will put straight, cisgender, able-bodied, middle-class men in the lead. So we call and fight for a vegan collective praxis that uses a true anti-racism, anti-oppression lens and embodies Black liberation and the dismantling of white supremacist systems and institutions in a supposed post-racial era, along with the systems that abuse and oppress non-human animals. So I want to share with this last, over the course of the last few weeks, I've been reaching out to very big and well-known companies that make vegan products as potential sponsors. So far, I've not received any support, no surprise there. But I'm assuming many of the companies are busy and or don't understand how their businesses connect to Black Lives Matter. Or perhaps they are smart and they know that most of their patrons would no longer purchase those products or services if they made the political statement about where they are in terms of solidarity with anti-racism movements like Black Lives Matter. So as a matter of fact today, a well-known vegan products company responded to my request for sponsorship for a conference with a no. They explained that they simply cannot say yes to the numerous requests that they received. And I gave them an appreciative letter in response. I let them know that I've been using their hemp products for years and that I have 3 very healthy plant-based pregnancies and that I'm also working on a new book. And I think most mainstream vegan product companies probably don't think about the racial healing aspects of their ingredients. So I'm hoping that my letter can inspire them and many other companies who take a post-racial approach to their marketing and meaning of their products to think about the possibility of partnering with us and other organizations like us in the future. So it would be great if they could enact solidarity with the anti-racism movements with something as simple as hemp seeds, spirulina, kale, and other vegan products I recommend for racial healing. So I have this book project, it's called Recipes for Racial Tension Headaches. So a lot of people are dealing with the tension and stress of racism, and for instance, maybe you're not sleeping well at night, so you don't know what to do. And I'll recommend, like, you know, if you eat a lot of hemp seeds, it's high in magnesium, and magnesium is very relaxant. So I've created hemp seeds, I've turned it into an object of anti-racism. Make sense? Versus what most companies think their products are raceless or post-racial. So the companies are saying no to me, but I assume the best in people and truly believe that most of the mainstream ethical product companies just need a little alternative education to understand how their products can fit into anti-racism and anti-speciesism movements at the same time. So perhaps I need to re-articulate that the consumption of hemp seeds by their usual post-racial mainstream animal rights vegan may mean, quote, I eat chia seeds and hemp seeds to get calcium and magnesium in a way that doesn't hurt animals, end quote. And then I can articulate that alternatively, perhaps a vegan of color dealing with racism-induced relaxation problems at night applies a different meaning to hemp seeds, like, quote, I eat hemp seeds at night because the high amount of magnesium has been proven to relax me and give me a calmer sleep for the emotional turmoil I'm experiencing after Ferguson. And I don't have to hurt an animal to do it. So here's an excerpt from a letter I sent to the company that emailed me today, and don't worry, I'm almost done. So this is what I wrote to them. I will apply again next year for your company's consideration to sponsor our annual conference. Also, I'm integrating many of your products into a book I'm writing called Recipes for Racial Tension Headaches, which is part recipe book and part critical analysis of systemic racism in the USA, and how eating certain vegan foods can help with the emotional and physical toll that events such as Trayvon Martin's murder in Ferguson can have on people of color engaged in anti-racism. I only want to suggest ingredients made by companies that are ethical and sell mostly vegan products. The high amount of magnesium found in hemp seeds is relaxing and helps for a better sleep and brain health during stress for many of my fans and activists who ask me for tips about eating a healthy, plant-based diet while surviving through systemic racism. They don't need to just survive. I want them to be able to thrive, and I know your products will help. End quote. So, concluding thoughts. It's only a paragraph. So what I'm doing here with the letter, as well as other letters I'll be sending to all the companies who don't want to sponsor us, is showing these companies that the meanings of ethical consumption applied to their products are not raceless. The mainstream meanings applied to the ethical vegan food products are very much embedded in racial narratives. It's just that if mostly white people eat the foods without regard to racial healing, the way my black fans do, this doesn't mean that they're taking a neutral or raceless approach to ethical consumption. The mere fact that critical reflections on race and ethical consumption doesn't occur to most white people is a continued process of their white racial formation. The need to not think about race or whiteness when applying meaning to the vegan object of an ethical consumption they are eating is part of the process of white racial formation within an era of neoliberal whiteness. So I hope this talk has given you some food for thought. It's actually part of a book that I hope to have ready in about a year and a half, so I'm still working through it, and I know some parts it may sound disjointed, some parts are not, but this is what I do. I go out, I give the talks, I try to put out the new themes that I'm working on, and just get feedback from the audience. So thank you for your time, and thank you for inviting me.